I used to think that losing yourself was something that happened slowly, over time, like a gradual slipping away, a series of missed moments and fading memories. But now I know better. Now I know that sometimes you can lose yourself in an instant. It started with a job. Not an exciting job, not one of those dream career stories where everything falls into place. Just a job. I took it because I needed the money, because my life in the city had become too expensive, too chaotic, too loud. When I saw the listing, caretaker needed for off-season lodge, 6 months, full room and board, it felt like the universe was handing me an escape. The lodge was deep in the mountains, a long and winding drive from the nearest town. It catered to hikers in the summer and skiers in the winter, but during the off-season, it was deserted. My job was simple. Keep the place in good shape, run the generators, make sure no animals got in. 6 months of solitude, fresh air, and absolute quiet. It sounded perfect. The owner, a wiry old man named Ted, walked me through the place before he left for the season. It was a massive, rustic structure. 3 floors, 24 rooms, a main hall with a fireplace big enough to stand in. The halls smelled of pine and old fabric. The floors creaked under every step. "This place gets lonely," Ted told me as we stood outside. "But it's easy work. Just remember, keep the front doors locked after dark, and if you hear anything in the halls at night, just stay in your room." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. The first month was uneventful. I settled into a routine. Wake up early, check the pipes, sweep the floors, read by the fire until my eyes grew heavy. The silence was exactly what I'd needed. But then, things started changing. At first, it was little things. Doors I'd closed would be open. My boots, which I always left by the fire, would be across the room when I woke up. And the smell, a strange, damp, earthy smell, began to creep into the hallways at night. And then, there were the footprints. I found them one morning in the main hall. Wet, barefoot prints leading from the front door, across the wooden floor, disappearing into the shadows near the staircase. I checked the locks. They were still bolted shut. That was the first night I slept with a knife under my pillow. The days blurred together after that. I stopped feeling like I was alone. Someone else was there. One night, I woke up to a noise. A soft, slow scratching from just outside my door. Not like an animal. Not like something clawed. It was careful, deliberate. I sat up in bed, heart hammering, gripping the knife so tightly my knuckles ached. The scratching continued, long, dragging movements along the wood. I wanted to call out, but my throat had closed up. My skin prickled with a cold sweat. I thought of what Ted had said. If you hear anything in the halls at night, just stay in your room. I stayed still. The scratching stopped. And then, the whispering began. A low, dry voice. Not words, just a sound. Something close to breathing. It drifted through the door, curling into the room like smoke. My body went rigid. I knew whoever was on the other side of that door was waiting for me to move. The whispering lasted hours. I stayed awake until dawn, gripping the knife, listening. When morning finally came, I found something new. A single handprint on the outside of my door. Long fingers. Too long. I should have left. I know that now, but I didn't. I told myself I was imagining things, that isolation was messing with my head. I kept going, kept cleaning, kept trying to pretend I was alone. Then, the generator failed. It had been old, sputtering for weeks, and that night, it finally gave up. The whole lodge plunged into blackness. No lights, no heat. Just me, alone, in the dark. I tried to fix it. I took my flashlight, went down to the basement, and started checking wires. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Above me. Slow. Measured. Moving across the floor of the main hall. I turned off my flashlight. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. The footsteps stopped, and then they started again, coming down the stairs. I pressed myself against the cold concrete wall. Whoever it was, they were coming toward the basement door. I clutched the wrench in my shaking hands, muscles coiled, heart slamming against my ribs. The door creaked. It didn't open. Instead, something pushed against it from the other side. Slowly, the wood bent inward, as if something, was leaning against it. I couldn't breathe. I waited for it to open the door. But instead, I heard something far worse. The whispering, right on the other side of the wood. I see you. I don't remember running. I don't remember getting to my car. The next thing I knew, I was tearing down the mountain road, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, gasping like I'd just surfaced from drowning. I never went back. Ted called me weeks later, asking why I'd abandoned the lodge. I didn't tell him the truth. I just told him I wouldn't be coming back. He didn't seem surprised. Before he hung up, he said something that still haunts me. You did the right thing leaving. Most don't. And then, after a long pause, did it ever say your name? I never answered. I just hung up. Because the truth was, on that last night, when I had pressed myself against that basement wall, clutching the wrench, listening to the whispering, it had. Story 2. I never should have taken the shortcut. It was late, later than I'd planned to be out. The interstate was backed up with traffic, an accident blocking both lanes for miles, and my GPS kept rerouting me onto side roads that looked like they hadn't seen a car in years. By the time I realized I was completely lost, I was already deep in the woods, my phone showing no signal, no map, no way back. I told myself to stay calm. I'd find my way. I'd been driving for nearly an hour without seeing another car, but there had to be something out here. A town, a gas station, a sign. Then I saw the light. A faint glow, just ahead, somewhere beyond the trees. Not headlights, something softer, warm, flickering, like a porch light or an old lamp in a window. I didn't think. I just turned onto the narrow gravel road leading toward it. The trees thickened, branches arching overhead like ribs closing in around me. The road narrowed, twisting, winding deeper and deeper into the forest. My tires crunched against the loose gravel, the sound swallowed by the stillness of the night. And then, I saw it. A house. It sat in a clearing, a lone structure in the middle of nowhere. Old, but well kept. A single porch light burned, casting long shadows across the wooden steps. A narrow dirt driveway curved around it, leading into the trees. I should have kept driving. Instead, I stopped. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel, trying to convince myself to knock on the door. I just needed directions. A way back to the main road. Maybe a landline to call someone. But something about the house felt off. It wasn't abandoned. The light was on, and the curtains in the front window swayed gently, as if a breeze had just passed through. But there was no sound, no movement, not even the distant hum of insects, just stillness. Then, as I sat there, the front door creaked open, just an inch. I held my breath. A second passed. 2. Nothing moved. I should have reversed, should have gotten the hell out of there, but instead, I turned off my car and stepped out. The air was thick, damp, heavy with the scent of moss and old wood. I stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned beneath my weight. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again. This time, the door swung open. Not all the way, just enough for me to see inside. The light was on. The living room stretched out before me, untouched, like a museum exhibit preserved in time. An old couch, a wooden rocking chair, a grandfather clock ticking softly in the corner. A framed photo sat on the mantel, a man and a woman, both smiling, their clothes faded with age. I called out, my voice small. Hello? Nothing. And then, a sound. From upstairs. A slow, deliberate creak. Footsteps. My body locked up. I should have left. But I couldn't move. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. Coming toward the stairs. I swallowed hard and took a step back, one foot on the porch, my hands shaking as I reached for the door handle. And then I saw it. The photograph. The one on the mantel. Only now, there were 3 people in it. The man, the woman, and someone standing behind them. Someone who hadn't been there before. I ran. I bolted down the steps, threw myself into my car, my hands fumbling with the keys. My breath came in ragged gasps as I turned the ignition, tires kicking up dirt as I slammed the gas. And then my headlights flickered, and in that brief, dying glow, I saw someone standing in the window, not watching, grinning. I don't remember driving home. Somehow, I I found my way back to the main road, my brain running on pure panic, my body on autopilot. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were still trembling, my pulse a wild drumbeat in my ears. I told myself I wouldn't look it up. I didn't want to know, but I couldn't stop myself. It took hours, but I finally found something, a missing persons case. A man and woman, last seen in a house deep in the woods. Never found. And the last person to see them? Their son. He called the police, hysterical, claiming someone had been living in the walls, watching them, waiting. By the time the cops arrived, the house was empty. The only sign that anyone had been there? A single photograph left on the mantel. The man, the woman, and someone standing behind them, smiling. Story 3. I wasn't supposed to be in that house. The first time I saw it, I was just a kid, riding my bike too far from home, taking turns down streets I didn't recognize. It was tucked between two normal houses, but it didn't belong. It looked wrong, like a place the world had forgotten. The windows were black and empty, the paint peeled in long, curling strips, and the front yard was nothing but dirt. No grass, no weeds, just dead earth. And yet, something about it called to me. I told my mom about it once. I asked her why no one lived there. She didn't like that. She grabbed my wrist, pulled me close and whispered, "You don't talk about that house." She said it like it was a rule, like it was something everyone knew. I didn't understand, but I listened. For years, I never mentioned it again, until the night I went inside. It was supposed to be a dare, just one stupid, impulsive mistake. It was my last summer before college, and my friends and I had been drinking too much, laughing too loud, feeling invincible. Someone brought up the house. Someone joked about breaking in. Someone, maybe me, said, "Bet you won't." So we went. We waited until after dark, parked down the block, and walked up the empty driveway, our sneakers crunching against the dry dirt. Up close, the house felt even more raw. The air was still, heavy, like a held breath. The windows loomed above us like watching eyes. But the door was unlocked. That should have been my first warning. I pushed it open, and the smell hit me. Rot, damp wood, old dust, something sour. The others coughed, gagged, but we went inside anyway, flashlights bouncing against warped floors, revealing walls scratched deep with marks that looked like clawed hands had raked against them. "Dude," one of my friends whispered, "this place is..." The door slammed shut behind us. We spun, my pulse a hammer in my ears. I grabbed the handle, twisted it hard, locked. Someone laughed nervously. Okay, not funny. But none of us had closed it. The air felt thick, pressing, suffocating. Our flashlights flickered, and then the footsteps started. Above us, heavy, deliberate, moving down the upstairs hall. All of us froze. The footsteps stopped. A long silence, and then a whisper from the top of the stairs. "You shouldn't be here." We ran. We threw ourselves at the door, slamming our bodies against it until, crack, it burst open and we spilled onto the dirt. We didn't look back, didn't stop running until we reached the car, breathless, shaking. We didn't talk about it. Not in the car. Not ever. Some of us moved away. Some of us just pretended it didn't happen. But then, a week later, one of my friends vanished. No note, no sign of struggle, just gone. And the last place he was seen? Walking toward that house. I drive past it sometimes. It's still there, still wrong, still waiting. And sometimes, when I pass it at night, I swear I see something standing in the upstairs window, watching, waiting. Story 4. I should have never taken the job. At the time, it seemed perfect. Night shift security at an old office building downtown. Decent pay, no boss breathing down my neck, and best of all, no people. Just me, a few cameras, and an old desk in a mostly abandoned high-rise. I didn't ask questions. I should have. The building was over a century old. 8 floors, most of them vacant, with only a few law offices and a real estate company still renting space. During the day, it was normal. At night, it was something else. I worked alone. The security office was on the first floor, just past the lobby. The setup was simple: a desk, a bank of old monitors showing feeds from security cameras, and a landline for emergencies. I was supposed to do a sweep of the building once an hour. Just a quick walk through the halls, make sure everything was locked up. The first few nights were uneventful. Just empty floors, flickering fluorescent lights, and the hum of old electrical wiring. But then, on my fourth night, I saw something on the cameras. A figure, standing in the hallway of the sixth floor. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. The camera feeds were grainy, low quality, full of static. But the more I stared, the clearer it became. It was a man, tall, thin, dressed in what looked like an old suit, the kind people wore 100 years ago. He stood perfectly still, facing the camera, and then he moved. Not a normal movement, not a casual turn or a shift in stance. He twitched. His head snapped to the side, too fast, too unnatural, like a broken puppet on invisible strings. I sat frozen, my breath shallow. The building was supposed to be empty. I reached for the radio. Hello? My voice cracked. This is security. Who's up there? No response. I checked the other cameras. The man was gone. I should have left. Instead, I did my job. I grabbed my flashlight, took the elevator to the sixth floor, and stepped into the hallway. It was empty, but something felt wrong. The air was stale, thick with a scent I couldn't place. The walls felt too close. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered. Like the architecture itself had shifted when I wasn't looking. And the silence. It wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that listens. I forced myself forward. The hallway ended in a single wooden door. One I had never seen before. One that wasn't supposed to be there. The old brass handle was ice cold under my fingers. I twisted it and stepped inside. The room was wrong. Not an office. Not storage. Just a dark, empty space. The floor was warped wood, the walls stained with age. And in the center of the room, a chair. Old. Worn. Facing the door. Facing me. I took a step closer. The moment my foot hit the floor, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun, heart hammering, gripping my flashlight like a weapon. The room wasn't empty anymore. The man from the camera was standing in the corner. Not moving, not blinking, just smiling. My breath hitched. I stepped back. His head twitched. Once, twice. Then, he rushed me. I don't remember running. I don't remember the elevator ride down, or how I made it to the parking garage. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. I quit that night. Didn't even go back for my last paycheck. But the worst part? The next morning, the building manager called me. Not to ask why I left. Not to check if I was okay. He asked me what I saw. Like he already knew. Like he'd had this conversation before. I didn't answer. I just hung up. Because the truth was, as I ran from that room, as I fled down the hallway, I passed an old framed photograph hanging on the wall. A photo of the building. A photo taken nearly 100 years ago. And in the front row, standing among the long-dead architects and businessmen who built it, was the man from the camera, still smiling. Story 5. I was never supposed to be in that house. I should have stayed on the road. I should have ignored the rain, ignored the dead battery, ignored the flickering porch light in the distance that called to me like some kind of lifeline. But I was cold, I was stranded, and at the time, that house was my only hope. I regret every step I took toward it. The storm had come out of nowhere. One minute, I was cruising down the highway, humming along to some static-filled radio station. The next, my car was sputtering to a stop, my engine choking on nothing. My phone had no signal, and the storm was only getting worse. I had no choice but to walk. That's when I saw it. A house, sitting alone at the end of a long, winding driveway, its porch light flickering in the downpour. The windows were dark, the trees surrounding it swayed violently in the wind. But it was shelter, so I ran. The front door was unlocked. That should have been my first warning. I pushed it open, stepped inside, and felt an instant chill. Not just from the rain soaking through my clothes, but from the air itself. It was thick, stale, wrong. Hello? I called out, but my voice sounded too small in the vast silence of the house. The layout was simple. A staircase leading up, a hallway stretching into the back, a sitting room just off to the side with an old fireplace that hadn't been used in years. Dust blanketed everything, and the furniture looked like it belonged to another century. It felt abandoned, but not empty. The door creaked shut behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned sharply, expecting to see someone there. No one. Just me. I told myself the wind had done it, that I was alone. I should have left. But then I saw the photographs. There were dozens of them, lining the walls of the sitting room. Black and white portraits, faded with time. I stepped closer, wiping a layer of dust off the glass. Faces stared back at me. Men and women, some young, some old, all dressed in stiff, formal clothes. No smiles, just blank expressions. And then I noticed something else. In every photo, in the background, there was a figure. A man, always slightly out of focus, always standing just behind the people in the photo, watching. My stomach turned. Then, from somewhere upstairs, a creak. My whole body locked up. It was the sound of a footstep, a slow, heavy step, then another. Someone was up there. I backed away from the photos, heart hammering. Maybe it was the owner. Maybe I had just broken into someone's home. I opened my mouth to call out, to apologize. But before I could, the lights flickered. For a brief second, in the reflection of the glass frame, I saw someone standing behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The air had changed. The room felt smaller. The silence had deepened, pressing in on me like a weight. I needed to get out. Now, I turned toward the door and stopped. The photographs on the wall had changed. They were all looking at me now. Every single face turned toward me. My stomach dropped. My vision blurred with panic. My brain screaming at me to run, run, run. I bolted for the door, yanking it open, stumbling into the storm. I didn't look back. By the time I reached my car, the storm had died down. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, desperate to get inside. Then, the engine roared to life. My heart nearly stopped. My battery had been dead. I didn't question it. I didn't care. I just threw the car into reverse, tires skidding against the wet pavement, and tore down the road. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away. I didn't stop shaking until I was home. That should have been the end of it. But when I woke up the next morning, something was wrong. There was a photograph on my nightstand, black and white, faded, and in the background, slightly out of focus, a man, standing just behind me, watching.